I love Lord of the Rings. The movies, the books, and the universe. It's the OG of modern fantasy settings, written by a madman who created entire languages before creating the people that spoke them. There have been a number of games licensed by the property over the years. Most are fine? I actually haven't touched most of them, but the ones I did were usually pretty high quality, albeit a bit jank. I have a memory of watching my cool uncles play the Twin Towers movie tie-in game, and it crashing a couple times. In today's game, Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2 is no exception to the jank rule. The Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2 is a real-time strategy game developed by EA Los Angeles. That studio made some really good games, and some really bad ones we don't like to talk about anymore. Look, I'm not going to go into my EA dissertation today, just know that I have little love for the company and the way it operates. Battle for Middle-earth 2 is actually quite tricky to obtain nowadays. See, while this is a Lord of the Rings game, it is one that was published by EA. And since they don't hold the license for Lord of the Rings anymore, this game cannot be legally sold. So it is technically abandonware and can only be found on eBay in disc format. That is, unless you are willing to sail the high seas of the internet. Specifically, I found it on this website and used this piece of software to install patches and fix a common bug. Read the posts at the website, they will do a much better job of explaining how to make this arcane shit work than I can. I still can't get Rise of the Witch King to run properly, so I won't be covering it today. So keep in mind, results will vary by machine and due to the fact that this is a 15-year-old game not designed for modern systems. Battle for Middle-earth 2, I can't keep saying that full name. I'm gonna call it ME2. Suck it, Shepard. ME2 is both a beautiful and ugly game to me. On a technical level, it has not held up. While these were superb 3D models at the time, their low poly counts, stretched textures, and lack of model variety within a unit are a reminder that this is a 15-year-old RTS game. Same with the resolution, as it only goes as high as 1080p. While that's not a problem for me, it is worth keeping note for those with higher resolution screens who want to avoid stretching. The cutscenes often use these models to varying effect. They will also apply the usage of concept art as game art more than once. But the visuals are saved by a very focused art style. ME2 is trying to emulate the looks of the movies while also incorporating bits of Tolkien fiction. And the result is a stunning art style with unique units and building models for each faction. There are tons of little visual details as well, like how the idle stance of a group of orcs is to form a circle around two orcs fighting it out. And each building has an animation set that will continually loop. These details are wholly unnecessary but help sell that this is Middle-earth. Overall, my thoughts on the graphics are that they're dated, but I do enjoy their look. The soundscape of ME2 is superb.
Clear the way! How about some fighting? Forward! We must stand against them! Attacking us! Destroy the flanks! Set the city of Dale ablaze! Ready for fighting!
Starting with the music, which is fantastic. Honestly, you could play this over some clips of the movies and it would fit right in with the rest of Howard Shore's scores. There's definitely some use of movie sounds and tracks in the game, but most of the soundtrack is original from what I can tell.
Reinforcements are here! Men of the East! Take them attacking us! We've expanded the treasures room!
Props to both Bill Brown, creator of Microsoft XP's sounds, and Jamie Christopherson, the composer of Metal Gear Revengeance's soundtrack, for collaborating to create a fitting soundscape. The in-game sounds are great as well. Battles are not overwhelming cacophonies of sound, but rather controlled chaos. No sound is ever too loud in comparison to another. As I said before, this game takes advantage of the movie soundscape and pulls some clashes and voice clips right from the movies.
Tree! Hold them at bay!
I am no tree.
not stand.
They even managed to get the actors of Gimli and Elrond to come back and voice their respective characters.
Elves of the Golden Wood, hear me! We must cast out the shadow in the forest. Our allies from Mirkwood and Erebor will heed our signal. Galadrim, to battle!
This is another one of those little details that shows how much the developers of this game ultimately respected the property. I do of course have a complaint with the audio. There are no subtitles for the movies, or in-game dialogue unless there are. There's no setting for subtitles in the options, there are just subtitles sometimes. Which is a bummer because the sound effects of the movies are sometimes louder than the dialogue. Additionally, there were times when mission audio would play over other mission audio, but it happened so infrequently I almost forgot to write about it.
The House of Elrond is well defended. Destroy it and the surrounding fortresses. The Elf Queen must die.
The gameplay is where the real heart and soul of ME2 lies. It's a rather standard real-time strategy game, with a focus on building bases and making units to duke it out with your opponents. Units typically exist in a horde format or in single units like trebuchets and trolls. Heroes are powerful single units whose base strength alone can turn the tide of a battle. There are different tiers of heroes ranging from about 1200 gold to 5000 gold at the high end. Each unit has 3 different stances they can take in battle. Aggressive deals more damage but takes more damage. Defensive causes units to absorb more damage but they deal far less. Neutral is the middle ground between, and that's where I leave most of my units. Partly because I am a bad player, but also partly because RTS games make me feel like I need enough Ritalin without adding stat changes to stances. Additionally, there's a unit experience mechanic. The higher level a unit, the more health it has and the more damage it can do. The level upgrades are marginal, but they are enough to make a difference in a fight between 2 otherwise equal units. Heroes also have the experience mechanic, but with added twists. Their levels still increase health and damage, but the levels are retained upon a hero's death. So if King Dane dies and you spend resources to revive him, he'll come back at the level he died at. These levels also unlock a variety of powers any one hero has at their disposal, with more powerful ones being unlocked all the way up to level 10. Many are useful, but I often felt that I kept forgetting to use them because I had so much on my mind already while playing this game. That's just a personal gripe though, nothing against the game. Each faction in ME2 can construct a similar set of buildings. These include buildings that will increase your resources and unit caps, unit production buildings, an upgrade building, defensive buildings, and a fortress where you can make builders and recruit heroes of your faction. These fortresses have building slots where you can make short and long-range defensive options along with faction-specific ones. The fortresses also come with a variety of upgrades to enhance their defense and your faction as a whole. Each faction's fortress has an ultimate ability that is locked away behind an expensive prerequisite upgrade. These things are ridiculous and range from powerful units to damaging abilities. There's a tad bit of variation between the two sides, as it were. Good factions can make buildings that give buff and heal units, while evil gets access to more resource production buildings. There are a total of 6 factions in ME2. Men, Elves, Dwarves, Goblins, Isengard, and Mordor. Each has their own unique units and heroes, and I'm going to talk about each one. The Men of the West are the first of the good factions I will be covering. They're a combination of the forces of Gondor and Rohan, meaning that most of your forces are Gondor except for your elite cav and a few heroes like Eowyn and Eomer. They are what I consider to be the most vanilla faction in the game. They can make most building types, including walls, and recruit most types of units in the game. Their units are nothing special for the most part, but they can sufficiently hold the line. The only place men truly lack is in siege weaponry. I feel that they could have added something more than just a trebuchet. The upgrade building for men is also unique because there are actually 2 buildings, one for unit upgrades and the other for economic upgrades. Economic upgrades are unique to men and help you pump out many mediocre units quickly. I really don't have much else to say about men because they play like the standard faction in all RTS games. Elves are, well, elves. Snooty nerds who live in seclusion, whining about the state of the world and about how they were once great. But they never help out except in the most dire of times to fuel their species' hero complex. But I have no outstanding biases toward these fine people, so I'll be able to objectively describe the faction to you. They're actually the worst of the good factions in my opinion. Their frontline infantry are garbage, their horsemen are garbage, most of their heroes are lame and include 2 half-elves, one of whom is mortal because there aren't enough elves around anymore for a full roster. The elves really only have 2 saving graces. The first is that their archers are godlike, especially once upgraded to Silverthorn arrows. This is a unique elven replacement for fire arrows. The elves' elite archers, Mirkwood Rangers, are potentially OP because they can hide in woods and fire faster than any other ranged unit in the game. The other reason why they aren't hot garbage is because of the Ents. The forest is furious and it's going to fornicate your fiefdom. Dwarves are masters of turtling and siegecraft. Dwarves build mineshafts to increase the amount of resources you produce, but it also gives you access to the underground tunnel network. Units can enter any mineshaft and then come out of any other mineshaft across the map. The balancing factor to this is that you can only fit 5 units at a time, but that's still a decently sized quick reaction force. Dwarves in general are pretty tough, and this is compounded by their use of mithril armor. Dwarves can use their expert craftsmanship to create machines of war that are able to quickly demolish structures. The Dwarves' only downside in my eyes is that they lack in heroes, with 3 compared to most other factions having at least 4. Mordor are probably the most powerful of the evil factions. They have access to a huge variety of units: orcs, easterlings, siege weapons, giant elephants, and my personal favorite, trolls. Trolls come in a variety of flavors, starting with the vanilla punch and throw rock boys. This is followed up by the chocolate drum trolls, who give a passive leadership buff to every unit around them. They can also kick some ass when needed. Lastly are the Rocky Road attack trolls. These are trolls armed with spiked clubs and heavily armored to boot. They are walking wrecking balls on the field that will annihilate pretty much anything in their path. They are quite expensive at 1100 gold, but by late game you can pump these boys out quickly. Mordor's hero variety is a bit lacking, since all you can summon are the Nazgul and the Mouth of Sauron, but at the same time, you can summon 6 of the 9 Nazgul, including the Witch King, so it seems like a fair trade to me. Isengard is a peculiar faction. Like, it doesn't excel in anything, but it's also not terrible. It has less unit variety than all other evil factions, but it has the added benefit of warg cavalry. The normal Uruk-hai frontline troops and archers are some of the strongest basic units in the game. They also have berserkers, which are like mini heroes in an assortment of siege weaponry. Just don't let them become too industrious. The heroes include Saruman, Wormtongue, and a bunch of Uruk punks, including the one that killed Boromir. The heroes are all pretty average, but Saruman is obviously the most powerful. But beyond the heroes and the berserker, there is no elite units to this faction, so it can suffer in the longer games. Goblins are objectively the worst faction in ME2. Their regular troops are the weakest in the game, their specialized units are more expensive to obtain, and they lack any kind of siege weaponry barring the Mountain Giant. They also severely lack in hero variety, with only one being an actual goblin. Goblins cannot build walls and don't have any real defensive options beyond comparatively expensive sentry towers. Their pike infantry are tanky, but they're locked behind an upgrade to the troll recruitment pit. Ditto with their spider rider cavalry. But goblins are also probably my favorite faction. You see, one does not play the goblins to win, but to become the Viet Gob and drive the capitalist invaders of good from your lands. Goblins have the same underground system that the dwarves have. By building tunnels across the map, you can quickly transport builders elsewhere if your main camp comes under capitalist siege. And while they turn their attention toward other matters, you can rebuild your strength in the mountains and return on the Azog Bolog Gob Trail. Therefore, as long as you have builders alive, you can realistically keep playing. I personally have a blast and suggest everyone give that playstyle a try. An additional factor to keep in mind is that each faction has their own special powers. There is some overlap, but for the most part, powers are unique to factions. You unlock powers using experience points gained by killing enemy units. There are multiple tiers of powers, and they range from buffs to units and buildings to summoning bombadils and balrogs. Any units summoned are on a timer, so make sure you time your powers to get the best bang for your buck. But don't worry if you mess up, because your powers cost nothing but the time it takes to recharge them. There's also no limit to how many spells can be used simultaneously, so sometimes things look a little insane on the screen. ME2 goes as far as to detail naval combat in Middle-earth. It's a bit limited with the good factions gaining access to elven ships and the evil ones to the Corsairs of Umbar. Each side gets access to 4 different types of ships. Transport ships need no introduction or explanation. They get your troops who can't swim, which is all of them, from point A to point B. Warships are useful escorts for transports or are used en masse to fight other ships. Bombardment ships are floating catapults that are used to hit shore positions and buildings. Lastly are the Doom ships. These things are suicide boats. They will destroy themselves, but they will take any ship in the vicinity with them, friend or foe. Naval combat is pretty goofy in general, and the best tactic I found is to get a bunch of warships, give them armor, and focus fire your foes down. You acquire ships through a shipwright, which is one of the many capturable buildings in ME2. Each battle map may have some capturable structures, which when spawn are map dependent. These include the shipwrights as mentioned earlier, inns, outposts, and the signal fires. Inns allow for the recruitment of specialized units for the faction that you may not have yet. Outposts are capturable buildings that will increase your resources per tick and provide a sightline, but that's about it. Signal fires reveal the fog of war in a large radius around the tower. Additionally, there are layers of NPC creatures that are scattered across the maps that can be farmed for unit XP or destroyed for their treasure. There are several game modes you can play in ME2. To start with are the campaigns. ME2 features 2 single-player campaigns of 8 missions each. The campaigns play out a version of the War in the North that occurred during the War of the Ring, respective to the side you're playing.
After the Fellowship is assembled and heads south to destroy the source of Sauron's power, the remaining leaders prepare for the Dark Lord's assault upon the northern lands. The Elven and Dwarven races have always had little trust for each other, but now they must unite and fight a common enemy.
Both campaigns are like extended tutorials for the first few missions and gradually evolve into challenge missions by the end. They're quite fun, but I would recommend playing whichever side you like first. Both campaigns are essentially mirrors of each other, so you will see some of the same maps. One very fun part of the campaigns is that you gain access to all the respective sides' powers, meaning you might be playing as the Goblins for a mission, but you will still have access to Mordor and Isengard spells. Powers are also cumulative, so any power you take on mission 1 will be available for missions 2 through 8. The challenge of the challenge missions can vary, but there are a couple like Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, that are an actual challenge and I enjoyed them. The second bit of gameplay is the War of the Ring mode. I haven't played a ton of this in the past, so it was mostly new to me. It's a weird little mode, because it's a hybrid of turn-based strategy and real-time strategy battles. Honestly, I think the best comparison for this mode would be the early Total War games, but with base building during the battles. You form armies around generals and then send them into battle on a turn-based strategy map mode. You then play a regular RTS style match against the enemy player using the units in your army as starting units. Meaning you start with a hero and their retinue in addition to standard builders. The winner of the skirmish battle ends up taking the territory. With these territories you can make buildings to create more units, provide more unit cap, or to create defensive structures. You can also build defensive armies that won't ever leave your territory, but can move between the different territories that you control. It's a very weird mode, and I kind of like it, but I don't see myself playing more than another couple rounds of it. It lacks in variety of buildings, and its turn-based system is not my favorite. Both sides essentially plan out their turns and then execute them upon ending their turn. That means all players' units are moving at the same time. I can see this being functional for 2 to 3 players, but I have a hard time imagining a full 8-player game will be legible. Lastly, and what is the real meat of any good strategy game, is the skirmish mode. I don't know what to say other than it's every nerd's wet dream. Do you want to reenact the Battle of Isengard but against goblins? How about destroying the Elves with the hardy Stout Kings? Do you want to know what were to happen if the forces of evil took hold of the Ring of Power? Or worse, the Elves? Duke it out with the AI and your friends on a variety of locations from Middle-earth or well-made player maps. In Skirmish, you can also summon a custom hero that you choose on the map selection screen along with your race. Custom heroes are made through a creator on the main menu. It's surprisingly in-depth with customizations for your hero's appearance, attributes, and powers. I highly recommend taking a look at it if you ever pick up this game. Funny enough, you can actually still play ME2 online with your friends, because there's a somewhat active community for this 15-year-old game. Granted, it's mostly Slavs, but one of them has stopped drinking a potato for long enough to bring fan servers online and wrote a program that tricks the in-game online portal to connect to these servers instead of EA's repurposed garbage heap. I'm quite happy with his development because while the AI is actually pretty alright, there's nothing quite like the feeling of playing against another player. There are a wide variety of community maps available to play in this particular install and out there on the web. Back in the days when there were official EA servers, there were easily accessible wave defense modes with modded custom heroes and even full adventures. I personally don't have any experience with them, but I have a friend who spent many hours playing in ME2's heyday and he's given me an anecdotal sense of what it was like. All said, I don't really have many complaints for the gameplay overall. I mean, there are some unit pathing foibles and minor bugs, but I think ME2 stands the test of time as an RTS. Years of fan patches have done wonders to keep this game alive. Though, be warned because there are still some bugs to be encountered. Like this troll who can't die. Or this Nazgul who can't fly. As far as the story goes, I don't have much to say about it. It's like someone tried to write a fanfic for the War of the North using the movies and the Silmarillion as inspiration. It's probably not far from the truth if I'm being honest. But the story drives the campaigns forward even if they're a bit trite. Though you do get to smash the homes of elves if you're playing the evil campaign. In conclusion, I really like ME2. It's a fun game with hours of single player content and the fan servers ensure that you and the boys can play some rounds together. Along with the added bonus of being free, I highly recommend the fact that anyone with a passing interest in Lord of the Rings or RTS games in general give it a chance. Even if you might have to create an arcane ritual to make this thing work. Thanks for watching.
They can't hide from a dwarf. How long do we have to wait?
From Lorien.